Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is E.J. Akonili. I am on the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Board, and I'm also Chief Medical Officer at Jersey City Medical Center. It is my unique honor on behalf of the board to welcome Mr. Robert Winston. Rob Winston currently serves as Vice President of Operations and Behavioral Health at RWJ Barnabas Health, Jersey City Medical Center, where he oversees 30 departments and manages over 800 employees. Prior to his role at JCMC, Mr. Winston served in a variety of leadership roles and devoted over 25 years to the health and human services areas, working in programs for individuals with mental illness. He is an in-demand, highly sought-after presenter, and he's taught dozens of workshops on motivational interviewing, crisis prevention, stress management, high reliability organization, gestalt therapy, among others. Mr. Winston holds a bachelor's degree in social work from James Madison University, a master's degree in social work from Rutgers University, a master's in business administration from Thomas Edison State University, and he is a licensed social worker, certified healthcare operations professional, and is a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. His professional experience, volunteer activities, and educational accomplishments helped earn him the Distinguished Social Work Alumni Award from James Madison University, as well as NJBIZ 40 Under 40 Award in Healthcare. Most importantly, Rob is a devoted co-worker and friend, and I am so thrilled and excited to welcome him today to the board.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alconili, and welcome everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you may be, or even good evening. And I'm so excited to be with you today. And that was a heck of an introduction, and I appreciate the kind words. Of course, 40 under 40 feels like a really long time ago, but that's all right. We all are moving in that direction. So we'll spend some time today talking about mental well-being, mental health, and how to support and take care of each other. I don't know maybe what you had in mind or what you thought you were going to experience today, but I do hope that in the time we have together, that you spend some time thinking about yourself, thinking about your loved ones, and thinking about what mental well-being and mental health means to you. And so we will jump right in. I always think it's funny when I do slides, and I've said this a couple of times as it's related to this slideshow. Of course, on my next slide, I have a picture of me, like you can't see me on the Zoom. But it's there. So as Dr. Akonili said, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm the Vice President of Operations and Behavioral Health here at Jersey City Medical Center. And I want to spend just a quick minute, a little bit, talking about mental health and why I do believe it's such an important topic. So for those of you who don't know, May was actually Mental Health Awareness Month, and I know it's June, but to me, mental health awareness is something that's year-round. Interesting thing, I'm a nerd. It took me a long time to be able to appreciate my nerddom. I now find that I've never seen an Excel spreadsheet that I don't love. Boy, did I not nail that line. But let's nerd out for just a couple minutes and let's just talk about some data, because I do think data is important. And especially when I say this to people, I do get sometimes I get surprised, sometimes I get oh, that makes sense. But in 2024, suicide rates in the United States of America hit a 70-year high. So we're going back to Great Depression era rates of suicide, with an estimated age-adjusted rate of 14.7 per 100,000. That is a 37% increase in the suicide rate since the year 2000. So in 24 short years, we've gone up a tremendous amount. The state I am in is actually much lower than that, which is New Jersey. And I can't necessarily tell you why we're that special, that our suicide rate is a little bit lower, or actually about 50% of the national rate, but it is rising and it is climbing. Firearms does remain the leading method of suicide in our country, with 54% of all deaths due to suicide. Interestingly enough, another people don't necessarily realize, in terms of whether it's adolescents and youth, middle-aged or older adults, the highest risk for suicide actually comes from older adults. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is as we go through some of the information I have for you today. But it is a population that does commit suicide at a higher rate than some of the other age groups that we see. Seasonal patterns are consistent. I know a lot of people would necessarily think that winter months would be the worst, but it's actually not. It's late spring, early summer is the highest rates of suicide. Youth suicide is sharply rising, especially among teen girls and marginalized groups such as the LGBTQ population. And some of those key drivers that we'll talk about is trauma, economic hardship, substance use, and a broken mental health system, which I'll also acknowledge just a little bit. And what I mean by a broken mental health system, and I'm sure you may have experienced this in your lifetime, and if you haven't, let me kind of bring it out to you. If you think about in terms of overall population to the number of mental health providers that people have access to, in the US, the average is about 300 population to every one mental health provider. In the state of New Jersey, where I am located, it's 320 to 1. And in Hudson County, which is Jersey City, it's one of the most densely populated counties in the entire country, we're at 950 to 1. So access to mental health care isn't necessarily what it should or could be. Another thing that I always say, especially when I give these talks in person, is I always ask people, if you're having significant chest pain, 9 out of 10 on the scale, it's getting worse and it's radiating to your jaw, how long would you wait before you contacted a medical professional? And I love, there's always one person in the room who's like, it's going to be fine. It's probably just gas. And I always let them know that they're dead in the morning. But, so if you were one of those people, fine. But realistically, most people, maybe you'll wait an hour or 2 hours. It's not getting any better. I'm going to actually contact somebody. But in the US, from the amount of time it takes for someone to experience a mental health symptom that they need support with, that they should talk to a professional with, till the time they actually seek out help, is 11 years. 11 years. And it's wild. You could talk about all the different reasons that happen, whether it be stigma, whether it be the we don't think we hold enough value to treat ourselves well when it comes to mental health, whether it's that pick yourself up by the bootstraps, whether it's, how we were raised and what it means to take care of ourselves in a mental health perspective and what that actually looked like. And that's why I always like to remind people that who we were becomes who we are. So, I think about, I share a little anecdote from my youth, and my anecdotes are true. I am not embellishing. I will tell you real things. I vividly remember one of my core memories growing up is I was that little kid. And that's not a picture of me, but I was that little kid playing Little League, much like so many of us in the US did, and pick your sport. But I will tell you, I've always been a nerd. I was always really good at being a nerd. And granted, I didn't respect it or love that part of me as much as I do now. When I was a child, I was really, really bad at baseball and t-ball. It didn't stop me from playing, but I was really bad at it. And one of my core memories was playing Little League, being out there with all of my friends. And as I did, I struck out. The pitcher struck me out. It didn't take much. And as a young gentleman, I did what I think a lot of people do when they strike out or they fail. I started to cry. And it's what happened next that becomes a core part of why I'm sharing this story with you, because my father was at the game. And I remember, my father telling me what I think a lot of young boys and girls have heard in their lifetime is that this is not something to cry about. I'll give you something to cry about. And if that lesson wasn't interesting enough, and I think we take those lessons onto adulthood too, why don't we take care of mental health? Well, I'll give you something to cry about. This isn't worthy of your tears. I think so. Anytime we fail or don't live up to an expectation, aren't able to do things, you better not cry about it because that's not important enough. But what happened next was even more psychologically impactful. My father, as punishment, took me out of the game and said, you can't even play the game, but you're going to sit here and you're going to watch your friends have fun. So if you think about in adulthood, why would one person ever take a risk to do something they may fail at if they're just going to get pulled out when they're not good enough? And I think we carry these lessons into adulthood a lot. And the lessons are very interesting. I remember a different game of baseball I was playing again as a young kid. And the baseball coach was very, very different than my father. And I actually remember him yelling at my father and him getting into an argument when he pulled me out of that game. But a different game. One thing as a little nerd that I was really good at was understanding the physics of how baseball is played. And I knew as a little kid, if I could hit the ball down the third base line, no little kid was going to make the throw from third base to first base before I could get there. So my goal in life was always to hit the ball as hard as I possibly could towards the third baseman and just know that they weren't going to be able to make the throw. And so I did that, and there I am standing at first base, all accomplished, all proud of myself. And up comes next is the coach's son, who is the antithesis of me. He's not a nerd. He's the big, strong athlete, and he proceeds to hit a ball 47 miles into the outfield. It's just going. By the time I get to second base, he is on me. He's already caught up to me. And what he did next was very interesting because I was now in his way and he was really going for a home run. He picked me up and he placed me down on third base, and then he carried me to home plate, placed me on home plate, and then he hit home plate. And you would think, well, what type of impact does that have in your life? Does that mean that, you're dependent on others for success? Or could it mean, hey, we don't have to be good at everything. And when we're struggling, maybe there's someone around us who could lift us up and take care of those things, who could carry us to the next goalpost, who could take us to the next thing. And I think we forget that. I think we forget that lesson. And I'll always be indebted to Bobby Corey was the kid's name. Oddly enough, 50 years later, I still remember the kid's name. I think it's very interesting to be able to carry those into adulthood and think about the different ways and the different things we do in life that maybe that little kid still lives within us. Maybe that little kid carries on day in and day out. And I remember too, we talk about stigma and we talk about mental health, and there was an important lesson in my household. Both my parents, my father, 2 doctoral degrees, PhD and an EDD. My mother, accomplished teacher, master's degree. Education was always considered very important. And as a nerd, education was important to me too, but maybe not in the same way. And that methodology, if I work harder, I will be more successful, was drilled in at a young age. And I remember very much coming home with a B plus on a test, being all proud of myself and my B plus. And it wasn't how I received the message when I got home. Because when I got home, it was, well, if you just worked a little harder, you could have gotten an A. So do we associate hard work with success? And do we say, if I work harder, I'll be more successful. And if I'm more successful, then I will be happier. But is that really the way we build internal self-esteem? Are we really happier when we are more successful and we work harder to get there? And I always interject this at this point because I think it's an important concept. In the world of, for me, the world of mental health and the world of psychotherapy and the world of psychology, do good and bad exist? Is it good to put pressure on ourselves to work hard to be successful because therefore I will be happier? Is that good or bad? And I say these words are 4-letter words as far as I'm concerned. We throw them out the window. Good and bad mean nothing in the world of therapy. I want to start framing how we think and how we do and how we play towards something a little bit more nimble. Is it healthy or is it unhealthy? I will tell you, nothing will motivate people like setting that goal and reaching that goal, right? If I reach that goal of success. But then what is something that so many of us do once we reach that goal? We tell ourselves it's not good enough and that the goal just needs to be a little bit further. And I think about that in a way that I look at myself, right? When I first started here, I was an assistant director in a behavioral health program here at this hospital. And then I was going to be the director, and I became the director. And I just knew that once I was a director, I was going to be satisfied and feel fulfilled, and my self-esteem was going to be good. But then I really wanted to be an AVP. And so I became an AVP, and I was so excited, and I got it, and I was there. And then I was like, well, wait, if I just work harder, I could be a VP. And then I became a VP, and now I'm a VP, and I'm sitting here going, well, VP is great, and I'm doing wonderful, but what if I was the chief operating officer? See, we always move the goalposts, or a lot of folks do, not all of us. And then the question becomes, which comes first, success or happiness? And if happiness is on the opposite side of success, then we never get there. We never get there. What leads what, right? They've actually done some studies on this. And I want to say some of the studies came out of Massachusetts. And not a good friend. Not a good friend. I don't know him from a hole in the wall, but I've seen many of his things and I've watched him speak. But I have a colleague of mine up there in Massachusetts has done a lot of work on this and a lot of studying on this. And those studies really have shown that 72% of the most successful people in the world, and when you measure success, we'll talk about business, we'll talk about life, but 72% of the most successful people in the world were happy before they were successful. So happiness led success, not the other way around. But yet, if you go back to what I've been talking about, if we just work harder, if we just get there, then we will feel successful. We will feel fulfilled. We will feel happy as long as we are successful. But really, the studies say the exact opposite is true. And I say that into making sure we acknowledge that we all experience different forms of mental stress and different forms of how we handle that stress. And I love the idea of the masks we wear, and it's an important part of Gestalt psychotherapy. I'm not going to go down that road. I could nerd out and talk about Gestalt for 3 hours. But when we think about how we relate into the world, is the person you present at work the same person you present at home? Is that the same person you maybe present in church or synagogue? Are how you act out at the bar with your friends the same as how you would be at a function with your boss and your colleagues from work? And you think about, you really want to challenge and think about the masks we wear. How many of your friends know what your bedroom life is like? So we all wear masks, and and I bring this up for a purpose, trust me, is because it does relate to our mental wellness and our mental health, is how we acknowledge those masks. Like I said to you, I was a self-proclaimed nerd, and I always have been. But I remember as a kid being absolutely tormented by my peers for being a nerd, for being that kid who wasn't athletic, who wasn't popular. And you think about how we bring that into adulthood and what makes us healthy and what masks do we wear. I pretend to be into the sport of football because that's what I thought I needed to do in order to be liked by my peers. When in actuality, I think American football is a boring game. They only play for 9 minutes, and I have to sit there for 3 hours and watch it. And I know that is not a popular opinion, and that is okay. But the masks we wear are super important to acknowledge and to really think about the healthy and unhealthy. I give an example because it's not simple, right? I'm not saying that we all take our masks off and we act the same in front of everybody. It's just whether or not it's healthy and it's serving you. I worked with early in my career, I was doing psychotherapy with a young man, 17 years old, captain of the football team, quarterback of his football team, ultra popular, very handsome young man. Wasn't dating, but certainly wasn't because he didn't have opportunity. He just was choosing not to. Um, and it was very interesting. He was coming to therapy because he just wasn't happy, but he couldn't really tell you what that meant. And his mom worried about him a lot. Parents were getting divorced. A lot of pressure from his father and from his grandfather on his father's side. Um, and I remember just sitting with him and making space for what it would be like if he took his mask off. If he took off the mask he was wearing, what would he take off? And he looked at me and he basically said, well, I hate playing football. I can't stand any of it. I don't like the way that they all look at me and they think I'm just this jock and whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, if you did show them the real you, what would they see? And he loved writing poetry. And I just thought it was so special. And I asked him to please share some of his poetry with me. He finally shared one small document, and honestly, it was really good. It was really good. And yet the mask he wore was so important to him because he didn't want to lose not the social status. That wasn't what was important. But he was so scared of what his father would think of him if he wasn't the tough jock that he needed to be. To the point where his grandfather actually bought him a really nice sports car, a very masculine sports car that he drove around, and he hated it. He absolutely hated it. Nobody asked him what he wanted. And you ask, so I say to him, well, what are the risks of being out there and taking off your mask and living a little bit more authentically? And he shared, I can't deal with that type of rejection from my father right now, and that's okay. Then you don't need to right this moment. However, you do need to find a way to let your authentic self live and breathe, even if it's just with yourself. Even if you're just looking at that part of you and showing it that it deserves love and attention as well. I think that's really, really important. And I honestly think it's the crux of mental health. How do we find those portions of ourselves in that mask, that little child who struck out? How do we as adults give that kid a hug and tell that kid it's going to be okay? Because that kid still lives with us every single day. So getting a little bit more into the weeds of stress and mental wellness, what is stress? What are some of the effects of stress, and how do we recognize what those symptoms look like? So we all experience stress in our everyday life, whether it's acute stress or chronic stress. So we'll talk first about acute stress. Acute stress can be anything from a work deadline to something's going on where you don't feel well, someone near else doesn't feel well. We all know what that feel like, and we can see the symptoms and signs of stress in our everyday life, whether it's irritability, whether it could be sweaty palms. I can tell you I'm sweating right now because I'm presenting to 85 faceless humans in a Zoom from around the world, and I'm feeling the need to perform and be really good for you. So that is a lot of acute stress, and really find it important that at least half of you take something back with you that's meaningful and impactful to yourselves. So that's putting a lot of stress, and I want to be able to live up to that stress. And just because I'm experiencing stress, it doesn't mean it's good or bad. Throw that out the world. Throw it out of somewhere. I'll get there. Throw it out the window. How about that? And I say that because that stress is driving me right now. And if I didn't have that stress, I bet honestly I would be more boring, monotone, and just read the slides to you. But I'm using that stress to try to be invigorating and try to be engaged and acknowledged with you. And it's very interesting. I could see on my screen, and I'm not going to say who it is. There is one person on my screen with a camera, and I'm using their facial expressions as my litmus test of whether I'm doing well. So thank you to that one person out there, and thank you for supporting my stress. I appreciate you. Dr. Akinili, you didn't have to go back on camera. But that's how we manifest stress in an acute way. And sometimes acute stress can go down an unhealthy road. I'm experiencing acute stress, and I say an unhealthy road, but I would say if you experience acute stress and your only way of managing acute stress is to go have a drink, I question if that's healthy or unhealthy. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you shouldn't have to drink after work. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm not saying everybody who has a drink after work must have a substance use disorder. I'm not saying that either. But I'm saying if it's your only way of managing or manifesting your stress, it might not be the healthiest thing. Some of the effects of stress, especially in a chronic way, includes physical impact. Stress does, and mental wellness affects our physical bodies 100%. I think about, and some of it's the way I sleep and some of it's stress. I have these permanent knots in my shoulders that just live there forever and ever and ever. But it does manifest in our muscles. It does manifest with headaches, with chronic fatigue, with higher blood pressure. We know that we can be more irritable when under significant stress, acute and chronic. And we do know that stress in general and anxiety in general, 70% of the time when we see an anxiety symptoms, there's something depression behind the scenes, whether it's true major depressive disorder or dysthymic disorder, is up to some colleagues of mine and maybe me. However, we know depression lives in that space. We also know that we have a behavioral impact to stress. And we think about the way my mom's side of the family is very, very Italian. And what do you do in an Italian family when there's a lot of stress? You eat. So eating became our stress coping mechanism. So overeating, undereating in certain circumstances becomes a stress impact. Procrastination. I know for me personally, I work better under pressure. So thinking about today, right, and thinking about the pressure and thinking about I needed to put stuff on, I kept procrastinating. So I finished these slides about 17 minutes ago. All good, works out for me. Here we are, and we got the slides and we're all ready to go. But that's how I manifest and use my stress. And certainly some of the other ways when we're feeling overwhelmed, feeling frustrated. And then, of course, the one thing I do want to mention as it relates to the physical manifestation of stress, anybody here, and you don't have to raise your hands, but just know internally, anyone here ever have trouble sleeping because your brain's going at 470 miles an hour thinking about everything? That's my good friend stress. So we talked about chronic stress can lead to serious health issues such as heart disease, obesity, diabetes, depression, fundamentally altering one's quality of life. And maintaining ways to do that to manage our stress and well-being is emphasizing proactive approach to alleviate stress. So I do want to walk away for just a second from this and get a little bit even more into the weeds of what's driving a lot of stress. And I say social media and the elephant in the room because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that social media is bad for your mental health, because that's not 100% causal. However, I do think we need to think about social media and what our what is our interaction? What is our scope? Are we dating our social media? And what does that look like? And how do we navigate that? And I'm not just going to talk about that because some people don't participate in social media at all. Trust me, I won't. It's applicable to all of us. But we think about the masks we wear and we think about screen time. You know, we're all wearing a mask online, right? We can be whoever we want to be under the guise of an avatar. And you question, is that healthy or unhealthy? I don't know. I think sometimes it's very healthy. I think about the closeted gay kid in the middle of a very conservative town who has no allies and feels alone, and yet online can feel some level of support or connectivity with another person. You can argue, is that healthy or unhealthy? I argue that it's healthy. And it's interesting. So social media alone, this is new studies that are coming out. One just came out of Oregon State, and I love it. That Oregon State was looking at what the biggest hurdle to their students achieving a good night's sleep. And I think so many people think about social media or going down a social media rabbit hole. I know certainly that can happen to me. I know last night, actually, I was in a YouTube rabbit hole and I blinked and it was 11:30 at night and I go to bed at 10. So it was not a good rabbit hole to go down. But is the biggest hurdle to a good night's sleep using too much screen time? And what they're finding is no, it's not that. That's not what the issue is. And I want to bring this back and talk a little bit about the suicide rates in older folks, because it's the same linking phenomenon. It's the same linking feeling that impacts people's inability to sleep, especially in this Oregon State study. And it was being lonely. And if you think about it, well, wait a second, how are you lonely when you're in social media and screen time and surrounded by all these other avatars and all these other people and all these other things? And, you know, there's a difference in being alone versus being lonely. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I think it's very easy to be lonely when you're looking at self in social media. You're looking at, by the way, the masks we wear, you're looking at everyone's perfect self, because no one goes on social media and presents their inner nerd. No one goes on social media and presents the parts of them that they're not confident in. Everyone always looks perfect. And every once in a while, you see this wonderful thing on TikTok or on Instagram where someone says, oh, I had a bad day yesterday. And I just want to let you know that, you know, what you see is a facade. And sometimes I cry and sometimes I do this. And you see all these people in the comments. It's so brave of you to share this. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for exposing your real self. So we see that. And I look at it, especially from a personality perspective, and I say, the comments are wild. It makes no sense to what's going on. People who are performative on social media are doing it because of why? They want likes, because they're equating likes with self-esteem. And if the more likes I get, the more self-esteem. And then they move that goalpost, right? If I get 100 likes to this post, I'm going to be successful and happy and a good person. They get the 100 likes. Now it has to be 150 likes. Then it has to be 1,000 likes. And now I have to have 1 million followers. And if I don't have 1 million followers, then I must not be good enough. And you're chasing this whole thing. And then I look at those same people who take their mask off and talk about how vulnerable they are. But yet, what is the opposite of love? Is it hate? The answer is no. Love is 10 out of 10 on our energy scale, right? If I love something, I feel passionate and engorging. And if I hate something, I feel passionate about it. That's how much I feel. I feel passionate that I hate you so much. So the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is ambivalence, is not caring at all. So I look at this person who was vulnerable on social media and they talk about and they share about how they had a bad day and they sat there crying and this, and yet they still just want to see how many people hit the like button. So they're chasing the same end. And so I understand this idea of how you can be very lonely in social media, especially when you're only staring at perfect people and their perfect friends and perfect environments that have all been staged. So looking at older people, I talked about suicide rates in the older people. One of the #1 reasons for suicide in the elderly population is being lonely. And it makes us think about the American society and how we grow old in our society, whether it be in our families' homes, which is not always the case, but oftentimes we wind up in congregate settings, whether it be assisted living, senior living, nursing care, etc. And I think one of the value and benefits of that is at least you're around other people. Now, that doesn't mean that being alone and lonely are the same thing. And I do think we do need to be alone at times in order to actually manage our own mental health and to take care of ourselves, is to spend some time with ourselves and to look at the masks that we're wearing and what is real and what not real. And how do we make contact with those parts of ourselves? And then more importantly, how do we make contact with other people so we are not feeling lonely? And what does that look like? And who is safe for us to be vulnerable with and who isn't safe to be vulnerable with? And that's what mental health and mental wellness truly is understanding the resources around you and being able to access them when you need them. Sometimes that resource is an external human being. Sometimes it's a professional, such as myself or one of my colleagues. And sometimes, honestly, it's looking in a mirror and being able to find the parts of you that can help soothe the parts of you that need to be helped. That little kid who struck out needs a hug from time to time. And how do we do that? And how do we really tackle what feeling lonely is? And I think about, I don't know how many folks are working from home these days. I know it would never have worked for me. I need to be around people as part of my mental wellness and mental health is to be around people. And I always think walking through the halls, I say hello to people. We have 2,800 employees in my hospital alone, as part of a hospital system that has 45,000 employees. Um, I always wonder, I say hello to everyone in the hall kind of obnoxiously. And if you're from New Jersey, that's kind of like not a norm. We actually don't say hello to each other. We don't hold doors open. And that's just the way we are. Like, and people think we're rude. And I just think that's our culture and our custom, and it's fine. But I went to college in Virginia, and a lot of my family lives in the Carolinas, so I've seen the other side, and I try to exercise that out. And I always wonder when people don't say hello back, or I get a grunt or a look, are they just being from New Jersey, or are they having a bad day? Did something happen that maybe I have no awareness of? That their little kid is really, really struggling, and I'm talking about their inner child or maybe their real child. And what does that look like? And when I think about that and I think about what their lives are like, and I wonder, when I'm having a bad day, do people know that it's not about them? Or do I somehow make them feel like it is because of the way I might be treating them? And what do I need to do for me to be able to soothe those parts so that way my experience doesn't become other people's experiences? And I talk about the goalposts, and I talk about, looking at our inner selves and what we need and what we want in order to manage our wellness and manage our mental health and manage our anxiety and our stress. And I found this quote online from a gentleman named Hugh Prather. And I just find it to be such an interesting idea of my anxiety doesn't come from thinking about the future, but from wanting to control it. So it's not the thought of what's going to happen in the future. It's that I need to control the iterations of what's going to happen next. And I think so much of that is fair. I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for making our own destiny as it comes versus really making sure that we have everything aligned in the way we have to have it done in order to take care of ourselves. So what is the difference between just thinking about the future and wanting to control it? It really is, well, maybe there's 7 different iterations of our future. How do I find joy in each one of them? Because they're not all going to be the measure of success. Remember, which comes first, successful happiness? It doesn't matter, is what I'm telling you. How do you find joy, or how do you find contentment, or how do you find relief in whatever iteration comes in front of you? What type of outlets and supports do you have for every iteration? And therefore, you don't need to control it because you know you have the supports you need in your life, internally and externally, to be able to take care of yourselves. Now, I'm pie in the sky here. If you're concerned about losing some of the fundamentals of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you're not sure where you're going to eat tomorrow, yeah, no, you should be anxious about that. And we should be able to help support each other to make sure that that's not a concern. However, when it comes to some of the less lower end of Maslow, how do we enable ourselves to give ourselves the permission to give those internal supports? How do we give ourselves permission to be vulnerable and ask for help? Which is really, really tough. It's really hard to do. And I look at people who do it, and I appreciate online, you see it more often now. People give congratulations when someone's vulnerable, and they say, thank you for asking for help. Thank you for showing that vulnerable side, because it is hard to do. And that actually, to me, is a measure of strength. People think it's weak to ask for help. I think it's really strong. I think it's really strong to look at a guy like Bobby Corey when he picks you up and plops you on the bases and say, thank you for supporting me, because I'm not good at this, and I need your help with that. That's strength. And I don't think we value that enough in our society. And so the gentleman I was referring to, from, I believe it's actually Harvard, but I'm not 100% sure, so please don't quote me. is a gentleman by the name of Sean Aker, and he's done a lot of work on something called positive psychology, and I kind of bought in. And it's funny because if you know me, I'm not exactly an optimist. But I kind of bought in because there's science behind it, and I love science. And if you have a chance, I do invite you to go over to his YouTube page and watch some of his stuff. He speaks better than I do, trust me. He's a great storyteller, and he interweaves data, science, statistics into stories, and I love every minute of it. And he tells a story. He starts most of his talks, and he did a TED talk as well, with the story of how he was playing as a little kid, and this is how he invented quote unquote positive psychology. Not that he invented it; it's been around, and he's just studying it. But his first experience with positive psychology, let's put it that way. But he and his sister were playing, and they were playing on bunk beds in the room, and his sister falls off the bunk bed and immediately starts crying, and he doesn't want to get in trouble. So he convinces her, because she landed on all fours, and he convinces her that the only being on the planet that could land on all fours from falling from that height is a unicorn. So she must be part unicorn. Otherwise, she would never be able to land like that. And she did stop crying, and the story gets more interesting because she actually broke her arm. But yet he convinced her through this idea that she is part unicorn, that she doesn't need to feel the pain in the same way, and she can experience it in a different way. And she actually stopped crying. And I think it's this wonderful idea. And again, you don't want to get too pie in the sky, but let's talk about the science behind it. And if you do a social experiment, if you will, where you find 6 things a day to be grateful for, and you acknowledge it. So his thing is to find 6 colleagues per day to compliment, and send them an email, send them a note. Hey, I saw oh, here, I'll do it right now. Dr. Akinili, an exec meeting earlier today. I know we were caught off guard with our new executive presence, and we were put on the spot a bit. And I thought you handled it with grace and presence to acknowledge his concerns with some of the operations of our organization that maybe we were unprepared to speak about because we had a new cadence. So, Dr. Akinili, thank you for always bringing your center and your support and your calm to a meeting, even when the pressure's on. So if you do that 6 times per day, and by the way, that was very authentic. That actually literally happened this morning, and I do think Dr. McNeely did a great job, probably better than I did in that meeting. If you do that 6 times per day, you actually start changing the chemistry of your brain. You actually change the neurotransmitters, and you change the way things are kind of going through your brain, and you actually start seeing the world a little bit more optimistically than you once did. And I always challenge people. I'll take it a little bit further than what Sean did. I'd say 6 per day is fine, but one of them, or add on. I always love do more. Let's be overachievers. Let's move the goalpost. Let's do 7 per day. One has to be about you. One of the most challenging pieces of homework I give my patients in private practice and therapy is mirror work, where you have to look in the mirror and tell yourself 10 things you love about yourself. And I tell you, some people can't get to 2. And that's okay. That's fine. There's no judgment. There's no good or bad. There's no good or bad. We throw that out the window. But when we are intentional about finding the things we were successful about, and the things that we did great, and the things that we did awful at and yet handled with grace and handled with honor, because by the way, we all strike out. We're all that little kid. And we strike out, we cry, we go back to the dugout, and then we get back up and we swing again, right? We be honoring to that part of ourselves that got back up and swung again. We don't get pulled out of the game. And we want to change challenges into, we want to see stress as a challenge, not a threat. So when we see it as a challenge, it gives us the opportunity to, again, hardwire and change our brain chemistry to say, oh, no, this is a challenge for me to overcome. This isn't a threat to bring me down. This is a hill I climb to get to the top. Right? So when we see stress that way, and we all heard the story about grandma who lifts the car off the baby, right? When we see stress as a challenge that needs to be overcome, then we think about different ways to do things. I was driving back from the Jersey Shore a couple weeks ago. Beautiful day, had my windows down, listening to music, and I was taking back roads because I hate the Garden State Parkway. Those of you from New Jersey will understand what I'm talking about. It's an awful, awful toll highway that everyone does a minimum of 100 and 120 miles an hour, and you take your life in your hands. And I'd much rather be on the back roads enjoying the beauty of New Jersey. And so I'm on the back road, and I get behind a gentleman on a two-lane road who is doing a good 15 miles under the speed limit and slowly sucking my soul out of my body. And so I tailgated him for a little while, and then I was like, oh, this is stupid. Just, it's a beautiful day. Enjoy the weather. Who cares? And I backed off, etc. And I get up to the traffic light, and it's ability to pass him at this point, but it is a red light. And I get next to him, and he gives me the 1-finger salute. Which fine. I actually only tailgated him for maybe a total of 20 seconds of the 10 minutes I was behind him, but okay. And I immediately, my gut instinct was to kind of react back and have my little road rage moment of, who the heck are you? And you, blah, 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 blah. And then it was amazing. I looked at him and I saw in his eyes something that wasn't anger. I saw something else, and I don't know what it was, but it wasn't anger. And I just wondered really quickly in challenges and threats, right? Something hurt him, and it wasn't me tailgating him. Maybe I was the straw that broke the camel's back that day, but it wasn't about me. It wasn't about me at all. And I chose not to make it about me. And I kind of mouthed, "I'm sorry" to him. And I think I just did this a little peaceful thing, and I kind of went on my way because whatever was going on for him, I didn't need to add to it. And so if we think about that, we think about others in their lives and what that looks like, and maybe think about ourselves, right? What does that look like for us, for ourselves? How do we honor those parts? How do we practice mindfulness daily? How do we take 60 seconds and do an inner look to our inner mind? Those of you who don't know box breathing, which is, you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and hold for 4 seconds. Again, there's science behind it. Do that 6 times, and you literally are resetting brain chemistry. So in those moments when you're too busy to do anything, take 60 seconds and do 6 box breathing exercises and reset your brain chemistry. I took this picture, by the way. It was on the shore in California, and I find the sea very, very calming. So I am sharing my calm with you, and I think it's important that even in those moments, maybe in that box breathing, or maybe we close our eyes and we picture the place in our lives where we are the most serene and the most connected. Mine happens to be the beach, as is a lot of people. It goes back psychologically to being in your mother's womb, but don't tell anybody that. We think about the beach, and I think one of the things I do when I teach people how to do internal mind visualization, I always say to people, don't think about what it looks like. Think about what it smells like. Because smell brings you to a location in your mind, a space, an experience better than anything. What does it smell like to be on the beach? Salt water has a smell. The ocean has a smell. The person sitting next to you with way too much sunscreen smells like coconut. And it all combines together into a visualization in your mind where you can literally experience where you once were. So yes, visualize it, see it, look at this picture, but also do some visualization of breathing exercises on the beach in your mind and smell what it smells like to be there. Balanced and healthy diet makes sense to everything we do. It also makes sense to our mental well-being, our mental health. Engaging in regular physical activity. It could be something as simple as walking, and it could be something more involved, such as playing basketball games, going for bike rides, going jogging. But engaging your body in activity, again, does change our bodies chemically. It does provide anxiety relief. And when we just sit, body emotion stays emotion. The longer we sit, the more time we sit with our thoughts. The more time we sit with our thoughts, do we cross the border into loneliness? And we now know loneliness is a big trigger. We want to have those strong social connections for support. Now, granted, I put an asterisk on this. Some people, it doesn't work. I worked with a gentleman for a year who had Asperger's, who did not, he did want to, no, see, I have to change it. He did want a social connection. He wanted a girlfriend who would sit on the couch, eat a TV dinner with him, watch the television with him to the shows he wanted to watch, and never talk to him. And that was the perfect relationship for him. And so we were trying to we needed an Asperger's dating site, to be perfectly honest. We needed some type of, match.com. I just dated myself, for him to be able to find that kind of connection that would work for him. But how do we have those social connections for support? And even more importantly, how do we find the connections within ourselves for our adult self to give our inner child a hug? And we have to prioritize sleep and relaxation time. I think this is highly important. If you're not going to sleep the same time every single night, you need to be. You need to turn your phones onto blue light filter mode at least an hour before sleep. If you're going to fall asleep to a television show, make sure it's a show you watched already. If you're going to read a book in bed, make sure it's a book you've read already, because then you're not wondering what happens next. And there's one other thing not on here that I do want to talk to you about. Well, 2 more things, and then we'll wrap up because I know it's time. Beware of the echo chamber we all live in. We surround ourselves with voices we find to be the most connected to where we are experiencing things, but sometimes those voices are the antithesis of what we need because we're so used to it and it feels so familiar. We just keep going back to it. versus as having an alternative point of view presented to us, or having and making space for someone to disagree with you. It's actually really important for our mental health to experience those things. And when you don't, and when you do live in the echo chamber, it can only add to your anger, anxiety, frustration, depression, etc. And the other thing I encourage people to do, and you can do it in any form you want, whether it be in a voice memo, in a notebook, or whatever, is journaling. I think journaling is really, really helpful for us knowing ourselves really well, knowing what drives us to that guy giving you the finger in the car next to you, what really drove him that day to have that level of experience. And then being able to look at those things. And when we do that and we see our masks, we see the masks we're wearing, the masks we have to wear, the masks we don't have to wear. How do we all take care of that, those masks and those inner portions of ourselves? What masks are you wearing? Do you have awareness of your mask? Are you not even sure? Do you not even know what your mask looks like? Go find it. Go find what that part of you looks like. And if you look at that mask and you say, ooh, I kind of want to change that, then make some space and figure out what you need to make that change. And if you don't, give that mask a giant hug and thank it for always taking care of you. Because your inner child's still fighting the good fight. What does he need now versus what did he need then, or she, for everyone on here, is really important for our mental wellness. So I spent a lot of time talking about inner child. I will show you mine. He is on the left with my big sister who always took care of me. So that's little me a whole many years ago. I love this picture. I honor this picture. And it's actually an exercise I give a lot of my patients, is that pick a picture from every year of life from birth until 18 years old and take a look at yourself. And it's one of the only pictures I found of myself, which is saying, and I use myself a lot because I want you to draw some comparisons to your whole life, not because I need you to know all the stuff about my life, but I noticed in a lot of pictures growing up, I talked about being picked on, I talked about being a nerd. I look sad in a lot of pictures. And this is one of those pictures where I don't look sad. And I just love this picture and I wanted to share it with you. I know you're all busy people. I thank you so much for spending the last 47 minutes with me, babbling and rambling on about something that I am wildly passionate about. I hope, again, at least 50% of you took a little bit of this and you could take it back. You could see within yourselves and you could see your loved ones. And again, I appreciate you spending the time with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was just phenomenal. There are some questions on the chat. So I'm going to start. Layla asked about, you may already have mentioned this. Do you have stress management skills for the political climate? Obviously, we're of all political inclinations on this call, but they're asking about stress management skills.
Yeah, it comes up a lot. And so I'll talk about it quickly from a micro level and then a little bit of a macro level. The answer is no. I don't have any skills no, I shouldn't say it like that. Here's what I will tell you is that there are certain things that are very real. And this is what I was talking about when you live in that bubble and you live in the echo chamber. And so much of our political environment has become the echo chamber on both on it doesn't matter, by the way. We're not talking about party affiliation. We're not talking about left, right, center. I'm not talking about that. We gear ourselves to what is familiar and what feels authentic to ourselves, even when it's unhealthy. This is why there's that thing that we talk about, certainly in therapy, why the divorce rate's so high in the United States. It's because we often marry our parents or the archetype of our parents because it feels very familiar and we equate that with love. Whereas that's not necessarily what we need as adults. We think it's what we need because it feels very familiar. So we tend to gravitate towards that. So what I recommend to all of my patients, and by the way, this comes up with literally all of my patients, especially right now, is beware of the echo chamber, limit screen time as it relates to this. And the other thing I tell people to do, especially with screen time, especially if that's where you derive a lot of your media, your attention and your media and your knowledge from, Twitter's a great example of this. Instagram's a great example of this. Make sure you're following things that aren't aligned with political agenda, such as an example, I am obsessed with roller coasters. So I follow the American Coaster Enthusiast. I follow Six Flags. I follow, Cedar Point. And what happens is the algorithm is learning your behavior. So I'll get 3 political commentaries and then I get a picture of a brand new roller coaster that's opening up to help sparse out what my brain can actually handle and take on. That's the first piece of advice I give you. The second piece of advice I give you is that you have to know yourself and need to know when you need to take a mental break. I've argued about this with some of my colleagues who say, people want to protest or people want to do this, they want to feel a part of things. And I agree that if you want to feel a part and it helps you feel supported and it helps you feel part and connected and feeling with like minds, that is a wonderful thing. But every once in a while, it's okay to take a me break. And it doesn't mean that you're giving up or you're not good enough. It just means that you're conserving your energy and you're rebalancing your energy for the next fight you're going to have or the next experience you need to have in order to feel part of something. I think we have to not be so hypercritical on ourselves when it comes to that thing. And I think the third thing I will tell you is that some of the things that are out there are legitimately scary, are legitimately part of Maslow. I have one gentleman I've been working with who is a gay male married in the state of New Jersey and is currently moving to Florida and has a lot of anxiety and stress about the political climate of the state of Florida as it relates to being LGBTQ. Those are real. Like those are real acute stressors. And then being able to navigate, do you have the social support network to be able to tolerate those stressors? Or is this the right time for you to be moving? Is this, what does that mean? And you have to talk about that with your husband and you have to process that. We can do a lot of stress management techniques, but those are also real things to think about as it relates to that. So I do think it's kind of a combination about all of those. And I will also tell you this, and I think, again, I come back to that 11 years thing. Sometimes you have to go talk to a professional. Sometimes you do need to make space and do that. I don't love online therapy for a billion different reasons, different talk, different day. But there are much more outlets now with the frequency of online therapy and how it's out there. Find a good therapist and talk to them. And the other thing I will tell you is 3. That was the number of therapists I went through before, and I found the one I clicked with. And it's okay. There was nothing wrong with the first 2. We just didn't click. So don't feel like you have to stick with someone and when it's not staying connected to you. Sean Aker. So the last name of the YouTube channel I recommended was Sean Aker. ACHOR. Hola, Carlos. Yo quiero visitar Costa Rica. And necesito practicar de mi español.
Kristen, is there anybody else? I can't see the full screen. Does anybody
Anyone
have
else would like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand or post it in the chat.
I think I went through the chat and I saw all the questions there.
Yes, but I cannot see a raised hand. Is there anybody else?
I don't see any at the moment.
And we answered the 2 questions in the chat. Well, I'm going to start wrapping up because that was a great session and this is going to be recorded. It's going to be shared with everybody. I just want to, on behalf of the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Board and everybody who made it, thank you very much, Rob, for this talk. And it's great. I get to have Rob next to me in my office and talk about these things, but this is really informative. I know, especially for a lot of our members, as you alluded to, we're going through some very stressful times, and to use your words, some of them are very real, but giving us stress management techniques, learning how to listen to our inner child and honor where we are and sort of stop that rat race to nowhere and sit back with ourselves. Those are invaluable. They're very important, but more so now. And we're very grateful that you took time out of your extremely busy day. And I know how busy that is here to come and talk to the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Board. So on behalf of all of us, thank you so much.